Okay, I'm so glad we get to do this. Both of us were really revved up for it. For anyone who sat through my introduction, I'm going to make it shorter, but I'm going to do it again in case anybody new is here. So I'm Christy from Parent Self Care. I work in an elementary school in California. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I love my role because I get to work with the whole school. So I get to work with gen ed and special ed. And part of my role is educator and parent wellness. And so I do participate in our special education as well. I also work really closely with our wonderful school psychologists. But sometimes I'll get pulled into the individualized education plan meetings just to support parents maybe with the emotional process or grieving around having their kids identified in special education, or just getting them connected to mental health services. Because I think what we're going to talk about today, Kabrena, is that there is so much demand for parents of special needs kids, and it can feel harder to fill your own cup. But we know it's just as important, if not more important. And part of the reason that I reached out to you is that sometimes I've felt like I needed more tips and tools in my tool belt to be able to support these families, because there are different intricacies with getting childcare, feeling comfortable with other people watching your kids. So I loved when I discovered you that you are just focused on special needs moms or families. And you know all of that from working in the field. So I'd love for you just to introduce yourself a little bit as well. I know that you're ABA trained and all of that, but I don't know that everybody knows what that means. So if you could brag a little bit about your credentials and what you do, and also scratch made as well.
For sure, for sure. So I am a board certified behavior analyst by trade. Hi, everybody. I'm Kabrena.
Yes, hello.
I am a BCBA, oftentimes, and meeting with colleagues in passing. We just call and refer to ourselves as a behavior analyst. And so what that means is we facilitate and provide services using applied behavior analysis. And what ABA really means is that, in layman terms, and I always try to make it as simplistic of a definition as possible, is making sure that we are providing services no matter the age of the child. So we can provide services to children and adults with developmental disabilities. A lot of behavior analysts work with those with TBI, and there's other applications in other settings as well. But we work with changing behaviors in the environment. So improving the behaviors we want to see more of, and decreasing the behaviors that are undesirable or maladaptive, that are challenging and are getting in the way of really having those positive outcomes within the home, or wherever setting the child or adult is placed in. So we have a lot of skills that we work on at the same time, from communication to toileting to the challenging behaviors itself. So there's so much to it, and so many pieces and layers, and that's why we're really good when it comes to kind of those therapy teams that we build around OT and SLP, because we kind of collaboratively make a treatment plan that's reflective of the client. So traditionally, I work with a lot of other therapists, and they come to me if they're ever having issues. Obviously, that is behavior related, but also there is a speech component. There's a social emotional component, obviously a behavior component. So we're kind of a melting pot of all those kind of skills, but obviously paying attention to motivation and positive reinforcement, and getting those behaviors that aren't serving the child, and figuring out maybe the function and how we can find appropriate ways to get their wants and needs met. So that's kind of what I do traditionally as a clinician. So what I got really throughout the 10 years, because I started right out of high school, is I was kind of like just fell into the field really. And in college, I went to University of Florida, and I was working with a kind of in a volunteer position, but working at a residential on-campus site for adults with developmental disabilities. And I was on the speech track, but I got really interested in watching a behavior analyst who's kind of a guru in the field in research. And I was like, that's kind of what I want to do now. But now that I've been in the field for 10 years, I started to see, and fast forward to getting the degree and passing board exam, I started to kind of see the challenges of a special needs parent, and meeting them no matter what age of the child is. If they've been, recently diagnosed, or the child is 20 or 30, I started to see a lot of similarities with their struggle. And it really didn't matter like how many years they've been as a special needs parent, they all commented on the same kind of, thing, that they wish they had time for themselves. And it is so hard for them to stay focused when they are on little to no energy, and they don't know
Right.
the last time that they've had a moment to themselves that didn't involve the needs of their child. Not to say that that's not what they would rather be doing, but that
Right.
they too sense a piece of them, and kind of like their identity kind of swept under the rug. So I started to see that affected our training sessions. And
Right.
when those things started to really kind of be red flags to me, it's like, no wonder you can't soak in what I'm telling you, because
Right.
you are just kind of drowning in all of this as a special needs parent. And it really is affecting you being able to successfully apply what I'm trying to train you on for your child, that will better your family's dynamic
Right.
at home, because you haven't really checked in with yourself in a while. That it's such a, people don't even think it's a gloss over topic, but I think it's very important. It's super,
Yes.
super important, because they have
Yeah.
so many things that they're expected to do. I'm hoping I'm not going too far in it, but
No.
we're just
No.
doing good. And so I
Yeah.
want to keep, we've had issues in the,
I know. We're here. We're gonna get
we're
it in.
here. So I want to
Um.
give you everything.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine a lot of people here maybe have a special needs child or work in the field, so you might all know. But I sort of laugh, especially working at the school. I call it like the alphabet soup of acronyms, because there's so much happening. So, but it is true. A lot of times, like we come together in a big team. So there could be OT for occupational therapy. There could be a speech and language therapist, which you were talking about potentially being interested in. Then we have the behavior side of the team. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And I think for me, being a therapist, we're always looking at the unmet need and what's below it, so that that need is no longer um, that behavior, maybe that undesirable behavior, ends up going away because we've met that need. And I think a lot of times as therapists, or at least for me, I'll speak for myself, we're a little bit like, it's more than behavioral and what's underneath this. And what I've loved in terms of teaming with the behaviorists at our school is that you are looking at the function of the behavior. So it could be attention. It's just using different language, but it's the same thing for us as therapists. And how do we help that child get that met in a positive way versus a negative way? And I think, in general, a lot of times the families I'm working with, kids might be on the autism spectrum, or sometimes have, complicated medical issues that have impacted their development as well, right? And that can impact who you feel comfortable watching your kid, of course, and all of that, making it trickier. But what I've seen with some of those kids is that routine and structure is even more important than the average kid, right? Like your family can it can be so much harder at home if you don't have a solid behavioral plan and routine that you really need to stick to. But if you are so stressed and burned out, how are you supposed to be able to carry that out with any consistency?
Right.
And so I think the same thing for any parent, right? Like if we take care of ourselves, we can trust our intuition more. We can remember the skills and tricks that we've learned from all these great providers. But if we're just here and our head is spinning, then there's not going to be consistency, probably more frustration on everyone's part. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like the parent needs their own plan.
Yes,
To ensure that
absolutely.
they're motivated, and getting
Yeah.
that time in for themselves is going to maintain their motivation.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I had a parent that, and I talk about this parent because she was one of my first kind of informal clients. I was
Okay.
working with her son, but I wasn't working with her, as a client with Scratchmate Consulting. And she was a trained chef, and she told me that one of the reasons she had quit her job and her career is because of the recent diagnosis of her child. And so she had this career and identity that she took pride in, and then this child
Yes.
came along with all these unexpected needs. And I just kind of glazed the issue a little bit, and she was telling me all the things that she used to do, and I was like, why can't you do that now? And she kind of just like, but I would feel guilty, or I don't know how I could do that now. And I gave her some suggestions, and she really took to it, and started to kind of formulate kind of a self-care ritual where she would make different lunches for herself, where she instead of like eating through the fast food window, going through the fast food drive-through, she was starting to really take care of her nutritional needs. So that was her form of self-care, and it really just kind of catapulted into kind of the beginning works of really like digging self-care, and like not thinking that she had a lot of misconceptions about it. And so it was just a great way to introduce her to, this is kind of what you need to be doing to yourself. Let's not forget about yourself again, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to get in a little bit more to just sort of, you talked about some themes that you see with parents and then how you're able to reach them too, because I think it helps when they have a professional that they trust and they know that you
Mm,
understand what's going on in their family, and then you can give them practical solutions
yeah.
instead of something that doesn't make sense. I notice you talk about a lot on your Instagram, like don't
Yeah.
compare yourself to other mom's self-care routine or get
Mhm.
discouraged by that. So I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But I just had this thought, and I wondered what you think about it. Is that I do think you can get really caught up in taking your child to all the appointments, right? So we talked about all the different specialists and appointments, especially, when we were in school. I'm not sure how it is for you in California. We're considering some hybrids and some special waivers, but for the most part, we're distance learning. Um, but I think that can be really hard too, because you get on this cycle of just being the
Mhm.
chauffeur to all the different appointments, and you want to do that for your child, and everyone's telling you early intervention is better and this is what you need. But I could see it sort of feels like that newborn life for moms where they're going to the doctor all the time, but slowly some moms might get a little bit more freedom from that. Whereas I think for a special needs family, if they're keeping up with more regular appointments, it can be really easy to put yourself at the bottom of the list and feel like you're
Mm.
not getting some of that time back for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's so many families, and it always kind of pings me when I see a mom that has like a 35-year-old child, because I've worked with, children as young as 2 to adults as old as 65.
Yeah.
And I see this with wives too, because the 65-year-old, obviously he had a wife and had an incident where he had TBI. But it always pings me when I see a parent or a spouse kind of view them like their old self, like the child without the disability, or kind of like they kind of just kind of hold on to what their life used to be like. And
Mm.
then a little sense of like, kind of just like, all like reminiscing, like,
Mm-hmm.
this is how it's going to be, this is how it's always been. So,
Right.
I see a lot of struggle with kind of like grappling with the truth that this is who they are.
Right.
um, and you have a choice to really, make sure that you're staying present and continue doing what you're doing. Like, there's not a lazy special needs parent. I've never met a lazy special needs parent. They are always on
Right.
the go, 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 and they get
Yep.
everything done.
Mm-hmm.
And they pride themselves in that. They pride themselves in talking about everything that they've done for their child or their
Yeah.
spouse, but then they forget about themselves. And so it's kind of like this weird perspective shift where it's like, what about you? What about your special
Right.
needs? And I mentioned that a lot on my on the on my IG on Scratchmate's page, because it's it's a sense of guilt that they feel. It's a sense
Right.
of, if I take my mind off of them for 1 second, then I am going, what how am I going to fulfill my needs if this child is constantly on my mind? You know what I mean? They have a sense
Right.
of, I can't think about anyone else but the needs of my special needs child or the needs of my spouse. So I kind of work with them where they are, and knowing that it's not going to change. This is kind of the diagnosis, but that's not all that they are, right? There's
Right.
more to it. And you've seen so much, you've done so much for them, but like knowing that no time is better than now to change your ways. You've spent and devoted so much time to your child, and it's time to think about the needs of you.
Right.
And that's kind of a new concept, because they're so traditionally they're used to a behavior analyst working with them in the form of like their home or a clinic
Right.
for their child. But the
Not for them.
beauty, exactly, the beauty of working and doing and being trained in ABA is I can work with any population. It just so happens that ABA is the most widely used tool that is used as an intervention tool for those with developmental disabilities, ASD specifically.
Right.
But it's a tool that you can use with anyone, and
Mm-hmm.
that's also kind of the mindset shift that they have to kind of like sink in, like, you work with me too.
Yeah.
And the progress that I've made with some of the people have just been mind-blowing. And of course we don't have this 20-page plan like I do with my clients, but it's
Right.
more of a kind of a blueprint where they can kind of take off and reference at any point during our coaching process, and they can just like, okay, this is easy to follow. Like, this is
Yeah.
not gonna make me like have to question whether or not I can do this. Like, this is giving me the steps that I need to do to make the changes in my behavior and to set aside time for myself, because everyone is very different. And as far as
Yes.
what times in their day they have freed up, or what times they can get some time for themselves that they didn't believe that they can. So it's also kind of just making them see a new try to see their life and reality in a new way, that there is more time than you realize that you have to make
Mhm.
time for yourself, and optimizing the time, which is something that they're not used to hearing, that you have time, because
Yeah.
everyone that comes to them is like, I don't know how you do it. You have, like, you must be up all night, you have so many therapies to go to, you
Right.
have this, and then you go home and there's more therapy, and then you have an IEP meeting, and like in ABA, and there's so much that they have to memorize, and so they feel like everyone's telling them that this is their jam-packed schedule. What in the world, how am I going to find any time to myself in that
Yeah.
schedule? And we can get to this, but I talk a lot about me time, and
Hmm.
how people have defined it literally like I'm spending time by myself. And one of the things that I do for parents that feel like there's just no possible way who's going to watch my child, I don't
Right.
trust anyone else with my child. You mentioned
Right.
it. And a lot of the parents, they have to kind of redefine what that is for them. And
Hmm.
I look at it as not just time by yourself, but time with your children doing something that you enjoy and initiated by yourself. So that
Hmm.
can be like an initiated activity that you are engaging in, that your child happens to be present for. I had a mom that used to go and just shoot hoops outside. She was a ex college basketball player, and she would go out and have her child join her, and that was something that she wanted to do, as opposed to, what did the therapist say that I need to do with my child? Like, this is something that
Right.
you're telling me, Kabrena, that I can do it. And it's so funny. It's like, no, I'm not giving you permission. You could have done this without me, but I'm giving you new
Right.
ideas to think and reframe your mind around what does me time look like, and
Yes.
what's really practical and realistic for you. So it's an interesting kind of conversation that I have a lot with special needs moms, but they're some of my favorite people because they're so resilient and so dedicated to the needs of their child. I mean, obviously, but they are so strong in that identity that they
Yes.
that they don't realize that they too can put as much output for their child on themselves too. Like, the work that they
Yeah.
do for their child, it's, you can do that for yourself, and it's
Absolutely.
baby steps, but that's where you can be, that progress that you see with your child. And I'm like, what are some of those undesirable behaviors that you want to get rid of? And I had a
Right.
mom that would just be like, I need to stop protesting that I can't do something, like those verbal protests that I can't,
Oh,
I want, there's no way,
right.
ha, never me. And
Yep.
she would just replace those words with different things, and
Yeah.
she would reward herself for making sure that she stuck to that promise to herself. So it's
Yeah.
it's 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 the principles at work of behavior analysis. So it's
Yes.
really interesting to see that.
It
I hope that
is.
answered your
And I
question.
love what you said that it's sort of like I do think we associate, especially in the field, ABA a lot with the autism spectrum, but it's just behavior principles. And so once people open their mind and say, hey, you could do this with anybody.
Yeah.
And then I also think you're right. Special needs parents sort of overfunction, right? Like they are very organized. They've got a lot of energy. They get things done.
Yeah.
They're great advocates for their kids. And if they can turn some of those skills towards themselves,
Yeah.
it's like, they can run with it because they've got all that skill set for their kids too.
Yeah.
And I think you said, and I just wanted to highlight this, that you talk with moms about what are your special needs,
Yeah.
which I love
Yeah.
because who's asking them? I think what we do a lot in meetings is a good job of validating how the struggle or the energy or how hard they're working. And then we
Mhm.
just go right back to the kid. So
Yeah.
it's not the follow up, it's the validation, sure. And we give that to them. But then it's like, okay, we've got to get to all these different things about your kid. So
Mhm.
let us know too if you guys have any questions, ask us questions. I just get so excited. Sometimes it's hard for me to say hello, but I see you and I'm waving to people. Um, so I
Hey.
wanted to talk with you a little bit about like how your business started and
Yeah.
sort of what I think we've heard some of it around just starting small and realistic and not being so rigid around what self-care is and isn't, which I am with you on. That's part of what I try to share too, is that something on my page may not work for you and we can get creative about it, right? So what are
Mm.
some of the things that you've like trends you've noticed in working with these families, um and how you developed your company and your coaching to reach these moms and support them?
For sure, for sure. Well, Scratch Made Consulting was started kind of on in lieu of my burnout. It wasn't due to I mean, it was inspired by, of course, by the families that I've worked with over the last 10 years. But initially, I was like, though, I'm not a special needs parent, I knew how it felt to be burnout. There's different symptoms of burnout that
Mm-hmm.
special needs parent also experience. And I, at the time, was working in the healthcare field,
Mm-hmm.
at a working in the setting with traumatic brain injury adults.
Okay.
And I love my job. I really did. It was a lot. I had taken on too much.
Yeah.
And to the eyes of my supervisors, I was performing well and my plans were stellar and behavior
Yeah.
change was happening and all of
Right.
my clients were doing well and they were, but I was not. And
Yeah.
it's because, as many people do it, we go home and we take our workload with us and we have our work phone with us and we answer
Mm-hmm.
calls and we stay up late, we clock in early, we stay late, and then we go home to do it all over again.
Yeah.
And so I was finishing up with a client which I adore, and I went in to go in the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I was just like, I hadn't looked in the mirror in a while, I guess. And so I was like, who is that looking back at me?
Yeah.
I looked like the world was on my shoulders. I literally looked like
Yeah.
like I had been run over a couple times. And I just remember feeling like, why are my shoulders so up? Why are
Yes.
bags under my eyes?
Yes.
Why is my skin different? Why am I looking just like heavy? Like just looking like I'm just carrying so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is burnout 2.0. And so I started to advocate for myself. I started to dial back in caseload. I started to
Mm-hmm.
say, pass this to another behavior analyst because I'm not
Yeah.
the only one here.
Yeah.
And I started to move out of the office earlier, and really focus on different forms of self-care. Um, I'm also a trained dancer. And so I started to say, well, Kabrena, when was the last time you moved?
Yeah.
You like to move. Like when I talk, I move with my hands because I'm just such a mover. And so I said, I haven't done anything like physical
Yeah.
care in a while. And I would just dismiss, weeks before, I just dismiss the idea of going to go work out and apply anything physical to my body, like make myself move and get up. And I had my stuff in the car and I was just like, yeah, I won't do this. So I started to stop, protesting and really make the point to go and do something for me. And I really needed to go through that because the period of time that went by was about 6 months
Okay. Yeah.
lacking, me time, my time. And I felt guilt, and it wasn't guilt due to having a child. It was guilt because I was a newlywed, and I felt like I needed to be home with my husband, and things
Right.
I needed to go straight home. That was kind of the most effective wife I could be, was just to be there. And
Right.
someone was like, no, I'm good. Go do your time. And I was like, oh, isn't that funny? We got to get validated and receive
Right.
permission from someone in order for us to be like, okay, I guess it is time for me. And so I'm more aware. My self-awareness has been raised up. And so I can almost kind of feel and sense, okay, before it gets to that point where I'm like responding in an
Right.
emergency state where I can go and spend that self-care time. But at the time I didn't have that muscle strength, and that skill
Mm-hmm.
was not there. And so I see a lot of that similarities with a lot of moms where it's like, um, you don't they don't want to say themselves that they need it. They need someone else to say, you need to spend that time for yourself. And then they're like, okay,
Yeah.
I heard it 1, 2, 3 times. Okay, it really is time for me.
Yes.
Because it's like, if they don't hear that, they'll just continue to go and do their normal routine or their expectations of the day. Um, and and so what made me shift is when I left working kind of full time as a clinician, I had a lot of clients kind of check up on me and ask me, they would just kind of have normal conversations with
Yeah.
me like a year or so later. And I realized that I was really needing to niche down to this population, to this specific group of
Mm-hmm.
adults that need this very niched service
Yes.
where no one else could tell me when I was working in the field and I was working alongside parents, and I would ask them, what do you do? Do you have support groups? Do you have things that you do just with parents? And it's like, no, it's really kind of focused just on the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the services that we have, and there are support groups that pop up once in a blue moon, but I don't feel comfortable going to those. That's what all of them would tell me. And so
Okay.
I started
Me
thinking back,
too.
like, really?
Right? Yeah. Or they'll say, I tried it. And that, like, we're different people are in different places in their journey, right? So you'll
Yes.
have these people being like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me, and da da da. And some people are
Yes.
more in their journey of being a special needs family. And they're like, I just need to process what happened. So I get a lot of, I tried it once and haven't gone back. So you
Right.
hear that too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they get kind of like shy, like they don't want a group setting to be how they really
Yeah.
express themselves. So I found one-to-one coaching to be more effective because it's just me and them.
Yep.
And so they trust me because one, they know they may not have directly worked with me and with their child, but they know that I know what I'm talking about when it
Yeah.
comes to behavior change because they see they work with behavior analysts,
Yeah.
and so they're like, okay, you know your stuff, you can apply some of that with me. Here we go. So my first kind of client was with a mom who I had worked with years ago, and she had joined my free Facebook group, Self Care is Non-Negotiable, and we
Oh, I
started.
like that title.
Yes, yes. For those that don't know, we do have a free Facebook group for
Mm-hmm.
those self care for special needs. It's really all moms, so
Yep.
for special needs moms, and self care is non-negotiable. And she was my first member in the group, and so I really just started focusing in on her. Her child was 16 or
Okay.
was 16 at the time, and she had a lot of experience. She was an ABA therapist herself.
Oh,
Um,
how interesting.
so
Okay.
I worked with her as behavior analyst for her child and years ago. And so we kind of caught up. And one of the things she kept telling me was, when I saw that your group was a group, she was like, I don't know if I want to join this group, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
give it a try. And that's kind of it's like 30% that response, and then 70% I'm so happy like that I found a group like yours, because that wasn't around when I first got my diagnosis for my son or daughter. Like that's
Right.
something that I hear a lot. Like they get a little bit, what is this about? Like, why are you wanting to know about me and not my child?
Child.
Isn't that and it's like, there you go again, you're pivoting. Like, this is for you for a reason,
Right.
because these things don't exist. You're underserved, group of adults that need this service. And self-care has been such a trendy term in the last 5 years. I think it's
Right.
like Google search like a million times. And I think the part of the reason is like they don't believe those two things can coexist,
Yeah.
being a special needs mom and having self-care, time for themselves. And for me, knowing that dynamic and working with the families, it
It
most
can.
certainly can,
Yeah.
without a doubt. And I think it's just a shift in um how we view it. And a lot of parents, they see what they see in the media. They see their friend do their form of self-care, and it's like, if that's how you want it to look like, there's no way I'm going to be in. Count me out.
Right.
So it's just a lot of peeling back those misconceptions, those limiting beliefs that it has to be this way. And I say this, with or without a special needs child, self-care is it's yours, right? Like, you don't need to have a boxed in definition. You can make it however you want it to be. You can have it change day to day. Like, it's
Yeah.
not this kind of the same routine. Like, that's such a beautiful thing about it, is that it really is caring for yourself, varying up depending on the day and the responsibilities that you have for the day. It really does change. And so when I get to tell them that, that's when they're like, tell me more. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
tell me, what else is it again? And I'm kind of with my messaging, I have some stubborn parents, that follow me, but I have to kind of beat the nail on the horse again, but
Yeah.
change the delivery of it so it's not the same thing, and to have different um call to actions and different prompts to get them to kind of to see a like another different way of looking at self-care, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
because it's that rigidity with them. It's like, no, you said it was this way. No, like there's so many layers. Okay,
Right.
it's so many layers of it, and for them, um it has to be practical. Time has to be on their side.
Hmm.
They have to have different uh, applications of it.
Yes, it can't
So
all be
they
the same
it
thing.
can't all be the same. It has to be, and they have to be. It has to kind of be a flexible thing for them. Otherwise, count them out again.
Right, right.
So starting with that parent in my Facebook group, I started to really think this could be one-to-one coaching, you know.
Yes.
And so that's what I've been doing, and it's been really great. I'm finishing up this last cohort, and then I'm going to do one more to end the year, and then I'm going to divvy out something special for the new year.
Okay.
And it's because I think I want to just approach it a little bit different with coaching, but it'll still be coaching, just in a different format. But it's going so well, so that I really do pay tribute to that mom that joined our group, that first member.
And
So
said, I'll check it out. I don't know.
yeah,
Well, I think it's important to have both, right? So
yes,
if you're just not going to join the group, and if you don't even want to try, then you can have the more individual option,
mm-hmm.
or you can use the group too. I mean, I'm a
Yeah,
big fan of community, but also I think for both, we're not going to force people to do something that they don't want to do,
of course not.
and you can all find community in many different ways.
Yeah.
Um, so, what are some of the things, like maybe the biggest misconceptions or things you hear from families, like I can't do it that way? And then what are
Uh,
some of the things that do you find, like once they're more bought in, they're willing to prioritize it, or what sort of helps them shift their mindset so that they can work in more time for themselves?
um, a lot of what I post, a lot of special needs moms will say it's like you're reading my mind.
Okay.
So excuse me, I post a lot of scenario based things. Um, I have a lot of parents that will ask, kind of like, I want to make sure I got your question right. Repeat the last question.
I guess I sort of got excited. I asked two things. One is, what sort of like media trends really turn
Oh,
those families off and make it
okay.
feel unmanageable? And I guess the second piece is, how how are they finding time for themselves? Like, what tips and tricks have helped with that? Or is
Oh,
it just getting them to buy into it, that it's possible? Um, and, getting that more flexibility from them around it
yeah.
being possible.
Yeah. So great set of questions. A lot of times when I post a bit, I post this in our free Facebook group, self-care is non-negotiable. But one of the first questions that I polled the group with was, what are some of your misconceptions that's keeping you from setting aside time for yourself? And a lot of them thought they had to budget for it,
Mm.
and I was a believer in that for a while. That was probably the number one, that literally turned them off,
Yeah.
because they have, limited funding, with the things that they have to do for their child, and it's just not in the budget. And so they thought they have to budget for it away, like a vacation away, miles and miles away.
Yeah.
um, and so I chuckle now because that's no longer their belief. That was the biggest one.
Okay.
And a lot of them thought that it was just like one type of self-care. They didn't realize that there were different types of self-care. So they would be like,
Yes.
fitness is not my thing. I don't want to do that. If you're going to,
Right.
one of the responses that I got, because I asked a set of questions before someone is allowed into the group, one of the responses was, if you're going to ask me to run around the block, I'm not going to do it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, someone has told you it's supposed to be what's enjoyable for you. What do you
Right.
prefer? And
Right.
so that was something, she no longer thinks that anymore, but that
Yeah.
was something that she thought was self-care. It's like,
Right.
whatever the drill sergeant tells me to do, that's what I'm going to have to do. And that's also something that I chuckle about a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, I won't make you do it.
I know. Another one, that is probably the last one that turns people off is the me time. And I kind of talked about this before, but
Yeah.
they believe that it's like hours spent away from their child. A lot of them love to be with their child. You know, a lot of them love
Right.
the comfort of knowing, you know, that their child is safe, and they love spending time with their child, and vice versa. Their child loves to be with them. So a lot of them thought that, do I have to constantly schedule respite in my house so I can leave my house? And I say it's a healthy balance. I actually was on a
Hmm.
podcast for one of the members in the group. She has a podcast.
Okay.
She's like a traveling autism specialist. And she was like, she's traveled with her children and she's traveled without her children to
Okay.
different countries.
Yeah.
And she asked me kind of this question, and she said a lot of parents kind of judge her for traveling without her children, but she's like, it's a healthy balance. And so me time, I say, can be with or without your children present. I've always felt that, but it's a good practice definitely
Right.
to spend some time away from them. So that's also kind of the big one that I've had to do to debunk, is that idea that, oh, me time is literally me time.
Right. Right. Well, there are so many different types of self-care, and I think, I talk about like relational and social self-care, and that's not you being alone, that's maybe you being with your friends or with your partner. Um, and I do think that permission piece you're talking about, while they're making the change themselves, you're not doing it for them. I do think that permission is so powerful, right? And that you are focused just on them. It's not a mom's group, it's a mom's group for them. And I remember when I had my little ones, one of my friends was going away for the weekend. She was also a mom of young kids, to visit a really good friend from school without her kids. And I remember I told her, I just thought, oh, you can do that. So sometimes you just need people in your life to model that for you, or whether it's a professional or a coach to say, oh yeah, you can do that if that's your goal. It's a healthy balance, and it's what's going to be comfortable for you. And you don't have to be comfortable going on a week-long trip without your kids to say that you're good at self-care. But I do think just that permission and putting that out there is so helpful for people.
It is. And I think to piggyback on that is, I keep thinking about that interview that I did recently, and she was like, what is it, what's something, and I think it was more a question to help her because she was getting ready to do a trip away.
Mhm.
She's like, what are some things that what are some tips you can give a parent that is preparing to leave, and she's starting to get a little antsy and may feel like she can't go away. And I remember saying kind of those affirmations that I kind of echo in our Instagram page is, time away is good, you know, everything is going to be okay. You have all of your things in order, whether it's the spouse that's leaving, you know, staying with your child, or respite that is going to be there. Nothing terrible is going to happen, and you are only a phone call away, but enjoy your time because you're
Mhm.
absolutely in need of this. You know, your body needs that recharge. And it's a good thing, you know, and don't look at it as a thing that you can't ever do again, because, you know, of course, the first trip away is going to be difficult, but one of the things that you'll start to find out is that there are things that you enjoy that you couldn't have seen yourself doing if your kids were there with you, special needs or not. Like, you get to kind of try out different things, and to, you know, to really explore, you know, and enjoy your full on vacation. And when she heard me say that, she was like, you know, that really was for me. That's a question that I need because I'm about to leave for
Yeah.
a trip.
Yeah. And I see now Frank is saying time is good for you away from your kids.
Yeah.
Um, and
So
then
good.
Ronnie is saying timely because she's planning to take some time away from her twins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you can do it. I think you can sort of pep yourself up for anything, right? You can say it's going to help everyone learn how to be more flexible. It's just a learning experience, a trial. And I know just one of just a lovely mom in my life, and now she's a grandma, said, enjoy your
Um,
time with your kids and enjoy your time away from your kids. And I
um,
just think you pick up these little mantras along the way that,
mhm.
um, for whatever reason, they just hit closer to home a little bit, and you can find a few to keep with you. Um, and so I've said that to myself a lot, that it's okay to enjoy my time with them, and it's also okay to enjoy my time without them too.
Right. And
Yeah.
it really is, when you think about the special needs child, like being away from the mom that's probably kind of been their caregiver, and the one that's done all their ADLs. That those skills also need to be generalized with other people. So not just you, but the respite and the spouse. those folks need to spend some time implementing those same skills with that child so that
Right.
they too can do that without you.
Right.
And because a lot of parents become like this prompt for, if they're around, I'm just going to expect that they're going to do it. But like other people in the family life that are related or unrelated needs that time to practice those skills too. So it's good to
Yeah.
step away. It's so good to step away.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to check in with you too and like pick your expert brain on this because I'm a big fan of rewarding yourself as an adult. We talk
Oh,
a lot about that in the school system, right? And I think everybody has a different level of being maybe intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated. But I found that's really helpful for me of
mhm.
figuring out what I want to do, why I'm motivated to do it. Then I sort of try to like work the obstacles out of the way. So, for example, even though maybe I don't love running around the block, it does help me when I move my body just to feel less stressed and all of that. But I'm never going to wake up at 5 o'clock before my kids are up and do that. It's not for me, right? So setting myself up for success and knowing like, okay, that's
Mhm.
got to be something that happens in the afternoon because why would I just keep doing this and feel badly about it? It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then rewarding yourself for those things, whether it's you know, maybe you're going to do that time with a friend instead of by yourself, or
Mhm.
just give yourself a little happy dance after you
No,
do it.
seriously.
So it doesn't need to be that you buy a new nail polish because you did
Yeah.
something, but how do you work with that motivation factor with parents and help them find ways to reward themselves? Because I think that's cool and we don't really talk about that as much.
Yeah, it's quite different when you're not working with a client and in the traditional sense of applying ABA, but when you're working with a special needs mom, the best way to channel reward and positive reinforcement is to have them reward themselves with things that they already do, but make it like enhanced. So I have a mom in the group, a client in the group, who is working on, she's been kind of doing her self-care plan, and her particular thing that she didn't like before starting with me is checking in with herself. So doing a lot of emotional self-care, and, giving herself, the time to show herself grace and all that
Yeah.
stuff, just really emotionally checking in. And one of the things that she rewards herself with is just this specialty. She's already kind of an avid tea drinker, but it's an everyday thing. But she saves it for when she engages in that behavior of checking in with herself emotionally. So like
Right.
that becomes a set of paired behaviors where it's like, okay, I do my thing with my self-care, emotional check-in, whether it's writing my journal, doing whatever that is, because it changes. She's one that
Right.
initiates and doesn't have to like, what does that look like, Kabrena? Like she'll just be like, okay, this is what I need. Like she's that aware. But
Yeah.
then the rewarding herself was not something in her repertoire, so I had
Okay.
to her how to reward herself. So her thing was tea, and I was like, well, save that specialty for the times that you do that check-in, so that
Yeah.
becomes a reinforcer for you. And it's just little things like that. I recently have published on my Scratch Make Consulting's blog about stir crazy items for parents that are often to keep their child at home for COVID, for the
Yeah.
school year due to COVID. And I had all these practical items, and a mom messaged me, was like, oh my gosh, I'm totally going to use this as a motivator for after I get done with 3 therapies. I'm going to
Yes.
reward myself on this schedule. Every 3 therapies, I'll go and reward myself with this shower bomb as she goes take a shower. And it's like the
Yes.
perfect time because ABA comes in. So it's like she feels like, okay, this is something I already do, so I don't feel too bad doing it, but like it's also my time, so I'm going to really like stand true in that this is my time, and I'm going to go ahead and give myself permission to go take a shower with this absolute fabulous shower bomb. And
Yes.
and that really just reinforces her behavior. So every time that third therapy session ends, she's like, it's time.
And she's looking forward to it.
She's looking forward to it, and it's like,
Yeah.
that's the contingency that she gives herself. Three
Yes.
therapies, then a break. Three more therapies, then a
And a
break. And
break.
that's what I love about the principles of behavior, is that everybody is different, but behavior happens on purpose. So utilizing reinforcement to strengthen that behavior that you want to see more of is key.
Yes. Yeah.
And so for me, I developed not really laying into reinforcement, but to kind of generate what is it that you enjoy to start off with, so that you know how to reinforce that behavior. I developed a method called the WIN method, and it's a 3-stage process where you can do this within a week, and it's recording your own behavior. And it's
Yeah.
a simple 1-sheet method where, again, it takes about 5 days, and you go through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And so when the parents come to me and they completed it and they're like, I didn't realize I do some of the same things every day. And oh yeah, those are things you can do. You can put that in your
Yeah.
self-care ritual. And then they're like, well, I need the motivation to continue doing it. And that's when they come to me and I help pinpoint some reinforcers for them. And then they're like, okay, this is what you do with my child, but I can see it being applied to me. And it's like,
Yes.
oh, this is such cool. Like, this is such a good science to use. They get so excited, like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Well, it's sort of like I don't know, it's just buy-in on every level, right? Maybe more buy-in to stick with the program with their kid and seeing how it works for them. Like, I think it helps so many different things.
And that's serious.
And
It
let's
accounts
see.
for buy-in.
Yeah. So it
Seeing
helps
that
both,
behavior.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Ari Max says that's so genius too by just making it easier to implement, right? Not totally reinventing the wheel. And then also maybe I thought with that client you're talking about, she might feel good. Hey, I'm already doing some stuff for self-care.
Mhm.
I'm maybe doing more than I thought, and I can feel good about that. And I can make some adjustments here or there to make things
Mhm.
more intentional and mindful and sort of special and rewarding for me. But
Yeah.
to know, like, hey, I was already doing some stuff for myself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's, and I say this, I keep echoing that, but it's one of my favorite things to do is to kind of be that behavior detective and like be able to pinpoint, okay, what do we need to troubleshoot, what do we need to get rid of, and what are the behaviors we need to replace, and then how are we going to reinforce that, so that behavior that I'm teaching you to do,
Yeah.
which is self-care related behavior, how are we going to keep that behavior around? We got to reinforce that. And
Yeah.
a lot of parents are like, I haven't rewarded myself since I was in high school. And then there's others that are like, I've been doing this with my child. Why didn't I think I could do it with myself?
Right.
We have a whole token board, and it's like, it may not be the same looking token board, but I can do this with me. You know, it can be just modified and have it to my interest and tailored to me. But it's just so interesting.
You know,
It's a,
I sometimes think we think as adults that we're like a little bit above it, and then like we're just human. And
yes,
so we don't need to make it with clip art and with gold stars, but I
right.
mean, we are human, and it does help. And I think I've been really loving this book called Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, and I feel like it came out pretty recently, but it's very behavioral.
Uh-huh.
And it's about making sure that you celebrate in that moment. So he
Yes.
calls it shine. So it can be like doing a happy dance, imagining confetti is going off for you or something like
I
that,
love
so that you
that.
don't miss the moment. Because he's like, that's how you train your brain to keep building on these small, small habits.
Ooh.
And like
Oh,
investing in some
tiny.
special
It's called Tiny Habits.
tiny habits. And he's
I
all
need
about
to.
how small changes can become big changes in your life, right? But just like self care doesn't need to be super expensive. Like once you invest in that pretty journal that makes you happy or some colored pens and you have your teas, it doesn't need to be like a weekend trip away or something really cost prohibitive too. And just
Yeah.
like taking a little time away to unplug and just check in with yourself, it doesn't need to be super long for it to feel really restorative.
Exactly, exactly. And I encounter parents that almost they go back and forth with the idea of whether or not it's going to work, and
Mm,
then they go back and forth with whether or not they support, the idea that this is something that they too can implement. But the buy-in, I get a lot of buy-in from seeing. I did a case study where I showcased a mom who was in our group. It wasn't in our coaching program,
mm,
but in our Facebook group. And the moms was like, I needed to see that because her
yeah.
son reminds me of my son. And the little help that she has, I too struggle with finding respite that I trust and that I feel like I can train. And the little things that she's doing in between the time of after and before, therapy sessions, I feel like I can do.
Mm,
And so seeing other moms observe other moms' success with the little,
yes.
the tips and strategies are the buy-in that I wasn't expecting, but that's something that definitely helps. I don't know if you are on a lot of Instagram like pages with a lot of special needs moms that are kind of like influencers. But there was a mom that went on a vacation, and there was another mom in the comment kind of shaming her for doing that. And it's kind of like, this is why this program exists, is because
Right.
people still believe that no, we just deserve to be in the funk
Yeah.
forever instead of
Forever.
enjoying life and having that time. And
Yeah.
it's very from person to person, but that is the reason why I have this program, is because people really believe that it's just not for them.
Right.
And there are a lot of people that are just coming to terms with, I can, I accept where I am, and I still can do something. I can put effort forward.
Yes.
So I have, it's a good kind of, that's why I continue to meet new people, is because there are people, encountering my pages from someone sharing it with them, and they're like, there's a page just for us, what?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it's that constant kind of just like, let me go back to the basics, reintroducing who Scratchmate is, what problem we solve. And yes, we do all of this for you guys, and it's just
Yes.
one problem, but it's a big one, and it's like that self-care for special needs
Yeah.
moms, it's amplified their needs. So I have to kind of echo that a lot
Yes. To sort
within.
of counteract. I mean, I think there's the beauty of social media and then the difficult part of social media.
Mm.
Hi, Johanna. Um,
Aw.
and getting that support and having a positive community out there, because whether intentional or unintentional, I think there's a lot of times something happens in the comments that makes people feel really badly about the choice that they've made, or can make them second guess it if they're already worried about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen it so much, so it makes me like, there's work to be done,
Yes. There's work to
a
be
lot of
done.
limiting beliefs to work through. So it kind of it makes me feel good that there's a need there, instead of feeling like everyone feels like they don't need it.
Yeah.
And that'd be great, but I know that that's not reality, and there are a lot of parents that have been struggling with this area. And so that's why our service is available for those families.
Yeah. Well, I love that, because I think especially, we spend so much time talking about the social emotional needs of our kids. And I think, I don't mean to add something else to a parent's plate that's already busy, but we teach so much by doing it for ourselves too.
Yeah.
And that's a really positive role model. And I think maybe if you're feeling that guilt, you can remind yourself that
Mm.
there's that way of teaching too, just by embodying it, that you can be lots of different things.
Mhm.
And you don't only have to be defined or stay in one role.
It's so true. That cookie cutter definition of self-care, I have to create a very special um, definition just for special needs moms, to make sure that they're not getting lost in what they see like other moms, because they're like, my needs are different than other moms that don't have special needs children. And yes, it's true, but you still feel similar feelings, but yes, your responsibilities are kind of,
Mm-hmm.
just different,
Right.
naturally. But I have a lot of moms that need me to echo that same messaging, a different way, because there's a lot of misconceptions, and a lot of people kind of filtering, their beliefs around self-care, that I have to kind of work through, unfortunately. But it's, like I said, I love the service that we provide, and it is still new to them, especially for moms that feel like, I've been doing this longer. I've been doing this role as a parent, and it's just like, no way, no way. But it's like, yeah, this is
Yeah.
practical, and you can use this, and it can work. But for more than anything, more than just the behavior of like refusing to do it, it's up here that I have to work
Mm.
through. It's that mental acceptance that I deserve that time. My life and things that I care about are not going to be in danger if I shift time to focus on me. And I can continue to do this. And once they see the results, that everything that you're doing for yourself is going to trickle down to your family,
Mm-hmm.
that the things that you weren't mentally present for aren't going to be so hard to implement. And the mom that I worked with initially, that she wasn't a client of mine, I felt like she was kind of like my guinea pig.
Right.
And the mom, the chef that I worked with, when she realized, her son was 3 years old at the time, but when she realized that she needed to start making really good meals for herself, she had so much energy. I kid you not, the next week she was just like, what is it that you wanted me to implement? When can we reschedule that meeting that I kept
Right.
canceling? What
Right.
else did you want me to come in for? Any other dates? And it was just like, my mind was blown. Not only
Yeah.
was she more like involved and like mentally involved in the needs of her child, she also was just like there.
Yeah.
She
More
was there.
present.
And she had the same responsibilities. She was just like, they're not going to go away. I'm going to accept this. But what I'm not going to do is put my needs years in the rearview mirror. Like, I'm going
Right.
to actually address this instead of
Right.
pretending that there's no way it can coexist. So that's mom in itself gives me the stamina to keep pounding this message to
Yes.
other people and to platforms like this.
Yes. Yeah. And to find that unique way with each client around
Yeah.
what's going to work for them. Well,
Mhm.